Hey friend, my name is Matthew Dale. I'm here to help you play better, sound great, and understand more. And recently I had a question on one of my Fractal videos about basically how is it possible to have a rig that sends a separate fully processed cab emulation signal to front of house while also going to a solid state power amp, powering a guitar speaker, a guitar cabinet, while also having like wet effects post amplifier. So I'm going to build that best of both worlds rig here in this video, and then I'm going to sort of optimize it to the rig that I have here in my studio at the moment, which I'm using the FM9 for this, but then I'm also going to that Marshall JCM 900 in the back, going to a 2x12 open back cabinet with Celestion V10 speakers in it. And there's going to be a couple of differences when using a tube power amp versus a solid state power amp, which is why I'm going to further optimize this. So let's get the basic routing together. So input 1, obviously going to the guitar. And this first chain that I'm going to be putting together is going to work really well with the FM3 as well. So you'll notice right now I'm going to output 2. I have my front of house signal going out of output 2 to the board, and then I'm going to use output 1 to send to the amplifier. Now, I'm using output 1 specifically because output 1 is still sending line level, and I know that that effects loop is set for line level on the back of that amp, and I can send a 1/4-inch cable out of output 1 into the back of the amp there. So I'm just using a regular guitar cable right now. I mean, you could go the humbuster route if you want to do that sort of thing, but for the short enough run that I got going here in my studio, just a regular guitar cable is doing it for me. So I'm going to pull in an amplifier. As far as amp tones go, I'm going to use my block library, so you can find my favorite tones for yourself at matthewdale.com/blocks. And I'm going to call in the Shiver clean, or the Shiva clean and dirty as well. So here's the Shiva lead, and I'm going to place the cabinet modeling over here, all the way in the back of the chain. And this is going to allow me to, again, block library here, greenbacks and V30s, 4x12s. That's going to allow me to have these wet post effects without the cabinet modeling sent to our real guitar cab here. So, just so we are able to hear what is going on, I'm going to mute out the cabinet for right now, just so we can hear this. I might need to change the level up on these, and we'll see. Bridge pickup on my DGT. Let's boost that level up a little bit. And I think I want just a little bit of post compression, so I'm going to use the compressor here, and again, block library, making it easy for me and for you. And I think that'll work. Let's switch gears and go over to the dirty channel. Let me make sure it's set. I don't want to use this compressor with the dirty channel. And again, we're going to mute this out. And now, again, going to front of house through our cabs. And that sounds like the way I want it to. Now let's go ahead and hear what we have going on through the speaker, although that's not really the point of this rig. It's not to send 3 signals to front of house or something. This would be used for live stage monitoring through a guitar cab. But just so you can hear a little bit more about what's going on, I have the speaker plugged into my Hughes & Kettner red box. So amp, red box, and then speaker cabinet. And then that DI'd red box signal is going into my mixer, and it is going to sound like this for us as well. So let me just change gears on our clean. So now here's what is happening back at the amplifier. Let's do a little bit of some dirty tones as well. Now, this is a 2x10 guitar cabinet. It's open back, and the 10-inch speakers have a little more higher mid, and open back means it's going to breathe a little more. So there's a little more high-end content. What it's doing really well versus the 4x12 cab IRs that I have is it does this thing really well. That kind of Leslie West mountain thing. That's just a tone that comes to mind when I hear that amp model going through that speaker cab. Anyway, but regardless, I've got good tone anyway. I feel really good about what's coming out. That'll cut really well on a stage, and then I like what I'm sending to front of house as well. So, obviously, you probably can't hear what I'm hearing in the room, but hopefully the red box is giving you a general sense. Let's go ahead and take a look at how to do the effect routing for this sort of thing, or how I would deal with the wet effects. Let's go ahead and add in a chorus, and a delay, and a reverb. Get the whole schmear going on here. And again, make it easier for you, easier for me, my block library. Let's go ahead and do the deluxe mind guy. I'm going to drop this down to 10%, just so it's not too wet. I'm going to turn off kill dry. I usually have these in parallel, but I'm in series right now. And let's change that over since we're in series. And same thing with this guy. So short plate, and turn that off, and that. And now, this is just everything. So here's everything clean going to front of house. And now here's everything dirty. Probably way too much. So let's listen to those now through the amp, and here's what it sounds like. So here's clean again. Let's do some dirty-ish things. Now, you might be asking yourself, aren't those stereo effects? And yes, they are. So I've got a subtle stereo. This is a stereo chorus, which I usually prefer. And I actually technically have this mono delay set up for some stereo things with the right post delay and some stereo reverb. But what I'm doing, because I'm only using the left side of output 1, I'm using what would be called half stereo. And half stereo isn't going to be like summing mono, so it's not going to get messier. Generally speaking, leaving your fractal setup as half stereo and just using one of the outputs going to a single source, like the input of the effects in of the amp back there, is going to be just fine. So that's working out just fine. And if I wanted to go the extra mile and be able to dial these in at a gig or at a venue a little bit more, I could do this. I could assign my chorus and my delay to the global effects mix, not the reverb, because the reverb already has one dedicated. So I could go into my setup menu and I could control, this would be controlling chorus and delay, the mix in either direction, 50% in either direction, and the same with the reverb mix. So that's really handy. I have these mapped to my global performance controls. That way they're really easy to get to, and I can dial in the amount of wet I want at a gig without going into many menus and changing a lot of things around. So this is how I would set up for the rig in question. I want one amp block. I want a fully processed front of house ready signal, and then I want post effects, but also running into a powered cab. And that cab and that rig, in that sense, was powered by a solid state power amp. But if I'm using a tube power amp like this actually isn't the ideal way of going about it. So let's talk about that. Before we do, I do want to mention that I go to depths and lengths on this concept of using your Fractal FM3, FM9 Axe-Fx3 along with a tube amp in my course, my Fractal course, Fractal Fundamentals. I have an entire lesson module, multiple lessons on the idea of using Fractal alongside of a tube amp. Front end, effects loop, 4-cable method plus an entire separate chain going to front of house, you name it. That is inside of Fractal Fundamentals, plus so much more, so you can master your FM3, FM9, and Axe-Fx3. You can find it linked in the description box below if you want to learn more about that course. Okay, now if I was setting this up specifically for the rig that I have here in the studio, I am going to create this complete separate other chain, and here's why. We're going to start with the amp block, and there's a handy little feature that will make this a lot easier where you can go ahead and go to Edit. If you right-click on the amp block, let's copy the block, and I'm going to paste it down to this. So now all of my settings are the same on each of these amplifiers, and then I can also go to channel 2 and move this one over to our channel 2 now as well. This gives me two benefits. One is tweaking this amp sound directly for that cabinet sound, and it also gives me the ability to go ahead and go into the power amp section and turn off power amp modeling since I'm going into a tube power amp. So I'm going to do that on both these channels here. And I'm also going to add in my compressor. I believe I still have some CPU left over, which is good. And light post, that's on clean, not on the dirty. So now with this happening, again, let's just take a listen to the cabinet or the Hughes and Kettner red box over on your side of things. Now again, I'm going to have to re-level this since I'm not using the power amp modeling here. So I'm just going to bring both of these back down a little bit. And it's really loud on that one. Let me go ahead and turn off all of my effects just so I can hear this. Yeah, so because I'm going into a tube power amp and I'm not emulating the power amp section here in this second amp block, the amp feels way more open, or I'm getting a more open, much more headroom out of the speaker that is there behind me, which is nice. And I could also say that on this dirty channel, maybe I want to just tweak the EQ a little bit. Might do the same thing here. And I might just do a little bit more compression. I think I just made that a little bit too dark for the neck pickup. Let's hear singles and little chorus on this and reverb. And then over on the dirty side of things, let's go ahead and just do some chorus and delay, maybe. Yeah, I think that sounds pretty good. So that's how I would do that, just so that I have something that is unique to front of house. Front of house is going to be exactly the same. If we want to go ahead and listen to that again, here's those same settings on dirty. And then also settings on clean. There's that. Real quick, just disclaimer, I did have to make one adjustment. I don't know if it's a bug that needs to be worked out right now, but I did have to switch my reverb, both of my reverbs, over to Recording Studio A. Also, it's just Studio A in my block library, because trying to copy this reverb over here to that reverb with the London plate setup that I had was basically throwing the second CPU out of control, and it was not working well. So I had to edit that and change this over to Recording Studio A, and now it's working just fine. So just disclaimer, just so you know, we're all keeping tabs here. I might have to report that. That might be some sort of odd bug that's happening in this firmware, so we'll see. Now, before we finish up here, just one last quick thing, just for practicality's sake. I might go ahead and leave like the front of house signal chain assigned to my global mix, and use my global reverb for that as well. But I might want to just assign the chorus mix and the second delay mix to their own parameter. And I might also do the same thing on amp 2. I might put the amp controls on their own sort of per preset performance control, just so we can, I'm going to move this over and maybe move the mids over there as well, just so that I have more control over what's going on that signal chain that's going to my live speaker. Again, because this is a tube power amp, I have tube power amp modeling or power amp modeling disabled. That's working a lot better with this rig, and I like using this. This is a really good setup for excellent control over your guitar tones, courtesy of, in this case, the FM9, but possible on all of the Fractal pieces of equipment, FM3, FM9, AXFX 3, in various different ways. My name is Matthew Dale. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Again, if you want to learn more about how to do this concept in a bunch of different iterations, remember to check out Fractal Fundamentals, and I will see you all in the next video.